Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Evergreen RX. I'm your host, Hayden, licensed mental health therapist, Cancer Moon, and the first to get deep at any party. And full transparency, just recorded the first half of this episode and thought that it was bad. And so I decided to stop and hit record again and try again. And so that's just a little bit of the behind the scenes, the glamour of doing this. And I think I say that too because like some of you might not really care, but I mention that to, like break the fourth wall a bit in however you may be perceiving me. If you're a listener and you've kind of been with me for a while and have gathered this perception of like who I am, or oh my god, this is so like easy, or she knows all these things that I don't, and whatever comparison. I don't know why it feels really awkward to be like, here's all the things that you think are great about me and let me burst your bubble, because you might not feel that way. But if there has been any comparison, I just want to break the fourth wall a bit and say, hey, I was sitting here recording and the whole time my voice in my head was like, why are you doing this? Literally, why are you making a podcast? Who cares? Like, what do you have to say? That was dumb. You should start over. This is so irrelevant. No one's going to care. Like, you literally have nothing to say. Like the critic is just yapping on, and it was like stopping me mid-sentence of like, I would just stop talking because it felt like pointless. And I'm still feeling that a little bit, but I'll try to work through it. Usually if I just give myself a clean reset, it helps. But sometimes there's just those days, like recording, speaking, thinking, just showing up for work. It can be really hard on certain days, and just, the criticism or the expectation can be really high for whatever reason. I don't really know why, but we do it anyway, and I'm going to do this anyway because I want to put out episodes consistently for you guys. But yeah, that's a little bit where I'm at. And so anyway, even right now, it's like my brain's going, okay, great, Hayden, like who cares? But I push past that because I think, I don't know, I guess it matters. It has to matter. Ugh. Oh God, this is hard sometimes. But I am actually really excited to get to this listener question today. I think when I was brainstorming for the episode, I think it's a really good one. And so we'll jump into it, and I will just try my best to leave my little inner critic at the door. I invite you to do the same thing if you're listening and like this is something that you struggle with as well and you're really hard on yourself about it. We're talking about indecision today, and I know a lot of people that feel indecisive and like they can't, make choices for themselves can feel a lot of shame about that, or feel just like, really bad or weak or like annoying. So if you're in that camp, maybe you can also kind of check that inner judgment and harshness at the door while you listen, and hopefully I'll have some things that are helpful, but also just kind of bringing in that compassion for, there's no like clear answer, and there's nothing wrong with you for struggling with indecision or things like that, and that's kind of like the ground that we want to build on from there. And yes, if you can take some of the things that I say today and it helps you with being more decisive, tuning into your own internal compass, that's wonderful. But the floor that we're starting on is that it's okay. Like, it's okay. You're just doing your best, and I'm doing my best, and that's wonderful. Okay, so I'll just jump right in to the question. It says, Dear Evergreen, lately, I've noticed I second guess myself constantly, even over small things like what to eat or what text to send. It's like I've lost my internal compass and every decision feels like life or death. How do I start rebuilding trust in myself, and how do I stop referring to others to make my decisions? It's funny because it just hit me as I was reading this, that part of what's happening for myself as I'm recording is I'm second guessing myself. Everything I'm saying, I'm like, should I have said that? Should I say it a different way? So kind of funny. It's like really very alive for me right now as well. But my first thought when it comes to, analysis paralysis, indecision, whatever, is wondering what is the worst that you think that could happen? What are you afraid will go wrong if you make a poor choice? This is something you can ask yourself specifically when you're having a problem with making a decision, but it's also more generally, like what is it that feels so scary about making the wrong choice? Because if there wasn't any fear or concern there probably wouldn't really be any indecision, because you'd just be like, I don't know, like what does it matter, left or right? Nothing bad's really gonna happen, so I guess I'll just go right because I'm just feeling it, or I guess I'll just go left. But there's not a concern there, so it's probably a lot quicker to just make that choice and see what happens. But knowing that there is a fear there that is probably has deeper layers than appears on the surface. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but that's the first place that my brain goes. And knowing that, whatever it is that you are stressing about, whether it's like, where you get dinner or how you're going to respond to, like, your friend asking you about plans or whatever, that's probably not the actual thing that's causing you a lot of stress. It's just kind of like a reallocation. So thinking about like where you get dinner or how you respond to your friend asking you about plans or something. Maybe it's small little decisions like that really start to paralyze you. It's probably not the actual thing that's causing you stress. Like, yeah, sure, there can be a concern, like I'm going to pick the wrong place for dinner, or maybe I'll say no to plans with my friend and then they'll have this awesome night that I'll have missed out on, and that's like, oh God, what do I do? Because I don't want to go, but I also don't want to miss out, and whatever. Like that can cause some level of stress. But when we're really agonizing over those little decisions, I take that as a sign that something else is going on that you're maybe not totally aware of or feels too big to know how to deal with. And so instead of dealing with that, our stress is shooting out and latching on to these other things that feel smaller and more in our control. And, an interesting way to kind of feel into this for yourself is think, well, are there times when it's worse, when your, decision paralysis is worse? For me, when I'm under stress, I find myself agonizing over small decisions more. That's kind of how I've come up with this. Not that I've really come up with this. I'm not the only person that says it, but that's how I've kind of identified for myself that it's not a matter of me just being an indecisive person or not knowing my own mind, but it's, oh, this is what happens when I'm stressed. This is a symptom of my stress and whatever is causing that. That, like, it's the same as if I like bit my nails. It's not the nail biting itself that's the problem. It's the stress that is causing me to then bite my nails to try to deal with it. So that's the same thing here. I might not, I don't think anybody is really just like an inherently indecisive person. I mean, maybe Libras, but I think that is always a symptom of whatever else is going on in our life, and feeling like we need to take control. And so we go to more of these insignificant things instead of the bigger, maybe uncontrollable situations in our life. We run into a lot of scenarios in life where we really can't do anything about it. We just kind of have to live through it. But that's very unpleasant and that's very unsettling and anxiety provoking. So, and I've said this before, I've said this a million times on the podcast, but I love to talk about it, that anxiety loves certainty. Anxiety wants certainty. So when you are searching for certainty, when you are searching for like, no, I need to look at all of the dinner options and pick the perfect one, because then somehow that'll make all this shit better, or just means a lot, that's a sign that like there's some dysregulation going on. There's some anxiety, like something is happening for you where it's your brain then is seeking out these kind of surefire things. And at the end of the day, the deal is that there's no right answer. There are very, very, very few things in life that have a right answer. And probably you could find someone that would fight you on that and say that, they disagree with your quote unquote universal right answer. But there's very few things in life, if any. And so this little stuff that you're agonizing over, there's not a right or wrong. There's nothing that you have to do. And there's only consequences of whatever thing that you pick. And this is something us indecisive girls do not like to sit with, which is the fact that there are always consequences to every choice, negative and positive, and usually a mix of both with every decision that we make. So, for example, you're agonizing over where to go for dinner. And I keep using this example because I've been there, girl. I'm so bad about making choices about dinner. And you pick the taco place over the pizza spot. But when you're getting tacos and you're eating them, you're like, these are not really hitting. They were like a little bit too expensive. I really regret. I should have gotten pizza. And you might be sitting there the whole time being like, see, this is what happens. This is why I have to agonize over my decisions, because then I would be having such a better night if I had pizza instead of tacos, and I'm hating these tacos and whatever. And it just creates this spiral. But the deal is, you just made a choice and it had some consequences. Sure, maybe you spent a little bit more money than you want, so your budget's a little bit tight for the rest of the month. And it just was like a disappointing meal. Those are some consequences for sure. But it's going to be okay. And you can't avoid that. Who's to say that if you went and got pizza instead, that would have felt right? Maybe you would have been also feeling like, this is a little bit heavier than I wanted. And, there was a super long line at this place. Like, who's to say that it would have been different? And maybe it would have been great, and you would have incurred more positive consequences of feeling satisfied and feeling like you made the right choice. But that can be problematic within itself, because it can kind of lend to this cycle of like, see, that's why it's okay that I spent 45 minutes deciding on dinner, because I made the right choice. And now I'm soothed from having made the right choice. But then the next decision you have to make will probably also incur its own kind of level of strife and strain, because it's not the actual problem to begin with. The thing to remember is that you can live through the consequences. You can live through the consequences of your choices. And a lot of this is embedded, like all of this is embedded with what you said in the original question, which is rebuilding trust, rebuilding self-trust. And how we do that is taking these little leaps and seeing that things are okay. And even when they're not okay, that they're still okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a really hard part of life, which is that sometimes there are bad consequences to our actions, where things do not feel okay. Like, shit is fucked up and it does not feel okay. But there's also a larger okay. You survived it. Obviously, we want to avoid that. We want to avoid these like huge like fuck ups or, whatever, missteps. But there is an ultimate kind of like, I can survive things. I can actually handle the tangible and the emotional consequences of my actions, the results of the choices that I make. That's part of being an adult. And that is part of being the captain of your own life and trusting yourself. Is like, no one else is gonna to do this for you. No one else can make the choices for your life. No one can steer the ship for you. Ultimately, that is something that you have to do for yourself, especially if you're wanting to live like an intentional and like self-guided, satisfying life. And I'm giving like kind of dumb examples. But if we scale up, the potential consequences get way scarier. Like from the dinner example, they get way scarier. And that can be, a big deterrent to making choices. Like, if we're scared that if we do something, if we don't, go hang out with our friend when they ask or whatever, that we're going to lose the friendship. That's a big thing to be afraid of. And those kinds of fears, losing friendships, being abandoned, being alone, being unlovable or unworthy, these are the kind of deeper fears and concerns that I'm talking about when I say like sometimes there's some stuff going on under the surface that we're just kind of trying to grapple with by clinging on to these relatively insignificant things, like a fear of abandonment, that then we're clinging on to every time a friend asks us to do something. We're paralyzed with saying yes or no. We feel like we can no longer just consult with our own internal desire, like, do I want to go, the farmer's market with my friend or not? But instead, this is now a moment that is like a microcosm of, if I say no to my friend when they ask me to have plans, maybe they'll be mad at me. And then, if they're mad at me, oh God, that's bad. What's going to happen? Are we going to have a fight or whatever? That really underneath all of that is like, I need to do things that other people want from me so that I'm not abandoned. And this is just one of many, many examples. But, this is the kind of bigger stuff that's underneath these small little moments. So something to remember to address this is, one, the thing you're fixated on might not be the actual source of your stress. That's what I was saying. 2, anxiety like certainty and also comes up with the worst case scenarios regardless of likelihood. And 3, you are capable and strong, and you are a person who is able to bounce back from hard experiences, and actually you can handle it. Those are 3 things to remember. Remembering that there's probably a source of your stress underneath whatever small choice you're agonizing over. 2, that if you're trying to find a black and white answer, that's most likely your anxiety, and the thing that you're fearing is a worst case scenario. And anxiety is not really consulting like how likely your worst case scenario actually is. Like if you say, no, I'm a little bit too tired to go to the farmer's market with you today, Sarah, that then Sarah is somehow going to not want to be your friend anymore. And then you're going to be alone. Like that's probably not super likely. But also 3, you're capable, you're strong, you have been through really hard things, you can handle really hard things, and you actually can bounce back from hard experiences. So it's a lot about gaining perspective and having these helpful reminders that you can tell yourself, like when you're ruminating or obsessing over choices, it's really, really, really hard. And I totally understand that. But one of the things we have to do with rumination and obsessive thoughts is stop them in their tracks when we notice it's happening, to remind ourselves of the things that I just listed, and remembering that there's no perfect or even right choice, and no one is holding the key that you don't have. When you talk about referring to others for your choices, like no one's holding some key, and that can just be, a way of shirking responsibility or kind of offsetting it to someone else, so that even if there is a unwanted consequence to your choice, if you consulted or asked someone else, now maybe it feels like you share the burden a little bit more, or that it's not all on you making a really bad choice that then resulted in this consequence. So, touching back in on that idea of self-trust, I have some more thoughts about, I think it can be helpful to figure out where the self-doubt comes from and what has undermined your ability and your belief in yourself to make good choices and to handle what comes your way. Like, has there been a time in your life where you made a decision that you really regretted? And like what would happen if you went with your gut? And if you've done that before and it backfired, is it possible for you to forgive yourself? Because no one in life comes out unscathed by the choices that they make. So seeing if you do have these ruptures where you feel like you really altered your life or did something that really hurt someone else, working on forgiving yourself so that you can rebuild that trust and understand that there's also been plenty of choices you've made in your life that worked out, that were positive, that helped someone else, that were supportive to you, and that you are allowed to trust yourself even when you have messed up in the past. And like I said, making tiny leaps and seeing that like it's probably okay, it'll work out. If you just kind of set a timer and you're like, I know I always get super stressed out about, making plans for the weekend or whatever. I'm going to set a 5-minute timer and I'm going to make some real decisive choices right now. I'm just going to try it out. I'm going to see how it goes and see that I actually can survive it. Also, last but not least, it is very hard to make choices when you're dysregulated. So regulate yourself, babes. I have a whole episode on how to regulate your nervous system. I will have to locate it, and I will link it in the show notes below, so you can listen to that if you want tips on how to do that. But, taking a breath, grounding yourself, and getting back into a little bit more of a regulated state, and then just going with your gut and seeing how it works out. Because at the very least, it's going to save you a lot of energy and time. It's exhausting to agonize over every small decision. So practicing tapping into and just going with your gut and seeing where that takes you in life. And my guess is it's going to take you some really cool places. So I hope this helped. This was a little bit of a struggle for me. I'm not going to lie. I'm like questioning if a lot of this made sense. So if some of it didn't make sense, reach out to me, ask me follow-up questions, or just let me know if it didn't. But I'm hoping, usually when I come back in the edit, I'm like, wait, okay, hold on, Hayden, you were being really hard on yourself. It's okay. But yeah, anyway, send me your questions at evergreenrx@gmail.com or 512-655-9888. I would love to hear from you, and share this with your indecisive friend in your life. Share it with all your Libras. Thanks so much for listening. I'll catch you guys next Wednesday.